You know, it's funny, isn't it, like how some Catholics kind of joke about aiming for purgatory.
Hmm.
But deep down, I think we all know, right? Like how serious it really is. Purgatory is the church suffering.
Hmm.
Like it's intense purification. And honestly, who wants to be away from God even for like a second longer than you have to be? You came to us with like this huge question. How can a devout Catholic, like yourself, completely bypass purgatory and go straight to heaven?
Yeah, that's a question that's been around like forever in the church. And you know the sources you gave us. It's such a mix. It's like traditional teachings and then like people's own thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
And even parts of, guides like devotions to avoid purgatory and how to avoid purgatory from Father O'Sullivan. It shows how deep, you're really searching for answers.
It's like putting together this spiritual toolkit, right? We're
Yeah.
trying to find the practical stuff and, like the spiritual ideas to kind of figure this whole thing out.
Yeah, totally. And one thing that keeps coming up in all of these, it's this idea that we have to be holy, like really holy, to, like not need so much purification. It's getting to the root of why we're apart from God in the first place, which is sin.
Father O'Sullivan is so direct in his book. He like lays out a super clear path, like step by step almost, to get sin out of your life completely. And he really emphasizes like, it's not just the mortal sins, the big ones, the ones that like break you off from God completely, but also those venial sins that you do on purpose, the smaller stuff that can pile up and like weigh you down.
It's kind of like the difference between like this huge open wound and then like a bunch of tiny cuts. They both need, attention and
Yeah.
healing.
That's good. That's such a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And Father Sullivan doesn't just like stop there. He talks about those bad habits that we all have. I was so surprised. Like he tells this story about this woman who would like gossip all the time about her neighbors. And she made this decision to stop, like a strong resolution. And her whole life changed.
It's like it shows how much power there is in really meaning it, like trying to make what you do, match up with how badly you want to be holy.
For sure. It's realizing, like, what are the things you do that, like, separate you from God?
Yeah.
And then, like, really trying to stop them.
And a lot of times that means the sacraments, especially confession and the Eucharist. Father O'Sullivan is like super into frequent confession. He says it's so powerful for like, getting back to God and washing all that sin away.
He sees it as like healing, right? Like being renewed. Yeah. And he's just as serious about, getting the Eucharist when you're in a state of grace. So like ideally going to Mass and communion every day.
You know what's so cool? He connects the Eucharist to like actually meeting Christ. He uses that story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector who climbed a tree just to get a look at Jesus.
Oh, I love that story. It's such a good example of how just like one encounter with Christ can just turn your whole life upside down. Zacchaeus repented, like he made up for all the bad stuff he did, and then he followed Christ.
Exactly. And Father O'Sullivan is saying, like, each time we have the Eucharist, it's like we're being invited to have that same experience, that same life-changing encounter. It's not just, going through the motions. It's being with God, like for real.
Okay, but let's be real. Not everyone can go to Mass every single day.
Yeah, you're right. But, like, what's important here is the intention. Wanting to receive the Eucharist as much as you possibly can. And when you do, it's like coming with this reverence, like ready to be changed.
Yeah, it's like, recognizing the power these sacraments have and then making them a part of your life so they can give you grace and make you stronger, as you try to be holy.
And a lot of times that journey means like embracing suffering. And I know that might sound, a little weird.
I was going to say, are we like supposed to be trying to get away from suffering, not like run towards it?
Oh, yeah, of course. But Father O'Sullivan is talking about like making suffering into something good, something that can, bring us closer to God. He wants us to like connect our suffering to the suffering of Christ, offering it up to God to, maybe lessen our time in purgatory.
So instead of just like toughing it out, we can choose to, make it a prayer, like a sacrifice. Like we're joining Christ's work of saving us.
Exactly. It's about changing how you see things. Like finding meaning even when things are really hard.
It's like taking all those annoying little things, like that coworker who drives you crazy, or getting stuck in traffic on the way home, or even like missing out on the last piece of cake. And you can turn all of that into, like little offerings to God.
Exactly. And that, that offering, being willing to like embrace the suffering, it can actually purify you, make you holier.
So it's like finding this deeper meaning, right? This like spiritual side to all the normal stuff that happens in life. And speaking of deeper meaning, Father O'Sullivan talks a lot about the power of prayer. he specifically says we should be praying for the grace to avoid purgatory, like all the time. Just make it a part of your daily routine.
And he's not just talking about, saying the same prayers over and over. It's more like having this relationship with God, like talking to him, listening to him, pouring your heart out to him. It's about looking to him for guidance, for mercy, and for the strength to keep going on this journey.
Yeah, it's like constantly talking to someone you love. You share your good times and your bad times, your hopes and your fears, and you look to them for comfort and support. But, beyond just praying on our own, we've got all these amazing devotions and sacraments. Like each one is meant to bring us closer to God. We've got the Rosary, the prayers of St. Bridget, Divine Mercy Sunday, and of course the Sacrament of Extreme Unction, which is also known as like the anointing of the sick.
They're like spiritual tools, Each one has its own special graces and blessings. And when we do them, like with real devotion and honesty, they can really, really help us avoid purgatory.
It's like putting together a spiritual, like arsenal. You're getting yourself ready for the fight against sin,
Yeah.
right? And trying to become holy. And we can't forget about indulgences. They're part of the arsenal too.
You got it. And devotions to avoid purgatory, like that whole book dives deep into indulgences. It lists all these practices that can, potentially shorten your time in purgatory. But here's the thing, right? It's not about like earning your way out of purgatory. It's more about getting your heart in line with what God wants, like opening yourself up to his grace and remembering that in the end, it's his mercy that saves us.
Okay, so we've covered a ton, right? Like, don't sin, embrace the suffering, confess often, get the Eucharist, pray, do those devotions, and remember the indulgences. Wow, it's a lot to take in.
I know, right? So out of all of that, what really stood out to you? What feels, the most important for you? Like what resonates with this desire to bypass purgatory and get to heaven?
I think for me, it's the part about making suffering into something good,
Mm-hmm.
like offering it up. It feels powerful. Like I can take, something hard and find a way to make it meaningful.
That's a huge insight.
Yeah.
It shows you really get it, like you understand what it means to be a Christian, sharing in Christ's suffering to, save ourselves and everyone else. But there's something else in these sources that I find so interesting, especially when we're talking about avoiding purgatory. The brown scapular.
Oh, yeah. The brown scapular with those two huge promises. It's such a powerful devotion, right?
Let's break it down. Okay, so it comes from the Carmelites, It's a sign of Mary's protection. The first promise is that anyone who dies wearing it won't go to hell. It's like a really big deal, right? It speaks to, how much we don't want to be apart from God forever. It does. But then there's the second promise. It's called the Sabbatine privilege. It says that Mary will come down on the Saturday after you die and take you out of purgatory.
Like a Saturday delivery from heaven.
Mm-hmm.
But you said there were like rules, right, to get this privilege.
Right.
It's not just wearing the scapular.
Exactly. There are three things. You have to wear the brown scapular, live a chaste life, according to your state in life, and say the little office of the Blessed Virgin Mary every day. And I know that last one might seem, like a lot, but there are other options.
Oh, good. Because not everyone can, say the little office every single day.
Right. That's why the church allows what's called commutation. So a priest, one who has the authority, can say, okay, instead of the little office, do this other pious work.
So something like, saying the rosary every day could count.
Exactly. Or even saying 7 Our Fathers, 7 Hail Marys, and 7 Glory Beths. The Carmelites suggest not doing anything less than that, though.
It's amazing how the church gives us all these different ways, right? Like different paths and choices because, we're all in different situations and we can do different things. But you know what? We've been focusing so much on like the traditional methods for avoiding purgatory, like the structured stuff. Yeah. What about something different, like something kind of, I don't know, unconventional?
You're talking about St. Thérèse of Lisieux, right? And her little way. It's so different from all these traditional ways we've been talking about.
Yes, exactly. Let's switch gears for a minute and talk about the little way. It's like a spiritual elevator street to heaven.
That's a perfect way to put it. Instead of focusing on like penances and indulgences and stuff, St. Therese was all about trusting God, like a little kid, finding holiness in, the little things, and just completely surrendering to God's will.
It's a whole new way of thinking, isn't it? Instead of being afraid of God's judgment, she was all about his love. I always loved that quote of hers, to pick up a pin for love can convert a soul. She's reminding us that even the tiniest thing you do, when you do it with love, can be huge.
It's like taking something totally normal and making it holy. realizing that every moment can be a chance to show God you love him and to become holier.
And she wasn't afraid to, like, aim high. Remember what she said? I desire not even purgatory. I want to go straight to heaven. She was so sure that trusting God's mercy was the key.
It's like she was saying, God, I trust you completely. I know you won't let me down.
It's so different from, how sometimes we talk about purgatory with fear.
And that's what's so amazing about the little way, It's all about hope, about love, about giving yourself completely to God's goodness.
So instead of thinking of ourselves as sinners who are going to be purified, we can see ourselves as God's children, loved by him unconditionally.
That's a huge shift, right? And it's really the heart of the gospel, isn't it? God's love is endless, and when we trust that love, our whole lives can change. We can bypass purgatory and go straight to heaven.
It's incredible, right? Like how all these sources, they're like a guide, not just to avoid purgatory, but to like have this really deep relationship with God, one that can like change your entire life.
It's true. It's like they're showing us different sides of the same, like, beautiful jewel. And each way, it shines a light on a different part of the path to being holy.
Oh, and speaking of light, you mentioned like the 15 promises of the Rosary, right?
Right.
They're kind of like a beacon of hope for people who want to avoid purgatory.
The Rosary, it's powerful. It combines like saying the prayers and thinking deeply about the mysteries of Christ's life, death, and resurrection. And those 15 promises, the ones people say came from St. Dominic, they offer so many graces to those who really pray the Rosary.
Some of them are like really specific, right? Like being protected from dying suddenly or being sure you'll have a happy death. But for what we're talking about, the most important promises are the ones about, getting out of purgatory and having special graces when you die.
Exactly. The promise that anyone who is devoted to the Rosary won't die without the sacraments of the Church. That's such a comfort, right? Especially if you're scared of dying before you're ready. And the fact that praying the Rosary means you'll have a high degree of glory in heaven, that really shows how powerful this devotion is.
It's like a spiritual insurance policy almost, right?
Yeah.
Knowing that what we do in this life, like how devoted we are to the Rosary, it'll have an effect on where we end up.
It's not really about like earning our way to heaven. It's more about, getting our hearts aligned with God's will through prayer and thinking deeply. The Rosary helps us to really think about the mysteries of our faith, to understand God's love more, and to have a deeper relationship with Mary, who's always praying for us on our way to heaven.
Speaking of powerful people praying for us, what about St. Bridget and those 12-year prayers of hers? They have some pretty amazing promises too, right?
Oh, they do. St. Bridget, she was a mystic back in the 14th century, and she got those prayers directly from Christ, along with like the guarantee of these amazing graces for whoever says them for 12 years.
One that always gets me is the one where it says, if you pray these prayers, you won't suffer in purgatory. That's like a really good reason to stick with this devotion, don't you think?
For sure. And the promise that your soul will be counted among the martyrs, that you'll have their special protection and they'll pray for you. It gives you such hope and comfort, especially if you think you might, suffer for your faith.
But 12 years of daily prayer, that's a long time. Is there like any wiggle room in this devotion?
Well, people interpret it differently, like how strict those 12 years have to be. Some think that even if you don't finish the whole 12 years, you'll still get some pretty big graces. And you can always, offer up what you've done, even if it's not finished, to God's mercy, trusting that he's good and forgiving.
That's good to know. That even if we don't do it perfectly, it's not all for nothing.
Yeah.
But beyond these like personal devotions, we also have things we do together as a church, like Divine Mercy Sunday. That seems really important to what we're talking about.
Yeah, Divine Mercy Sunday, it's the Sunday after Easter. It's pretty new, like on the liturgical calendar, but it comes from, what St. Faustina Kowalska said.
Right. In her diary, she wrote all about the visions she had of Jesus. And he was like really emphasizing how important it is to trust in his infinite mercy and to spread the message of divine mercy everywhere.
And Divine Mercy Sunday is like the culmination of that message.
Yeah.
That day, Jesus gives these extraordinary graces to anyone who comes to him with a truly sorry heart and a real desire to be forgiven.
I remember reading about all the promises that come with that day. Jesus himself said that whoever goes to confession or receives communion that day will have all their sins forgiven, even the punishment that comes with them.
It's huge, right? Offering a way to be completely reconciled with God and knowing you'll avoid purgatory.
But there are conditions, right? It's not just like
Yeah.
showing up on Divine Mercy Sunday and expecting to go straight to heaven.
Oh, exactly. Just like with all indulgences, there are things you need to do, ways you need to be to get the full remission of, that temporal punishment for sin.
So, like, what do you need to do? What are the conditions to get those incredible graces on Divine Mercy Sunday?
Well, the biggest thing is, you can't be attached to sin anymore. You have to have a sincere desire to change and be really resolved to live a better life.
So it's not just going through the motions. It's a real change, right? Like on the inside.
Yeah, for sure. And then there are the specific things you need to do. Make a good confession, receive communion, and do something to show your devotion to divine mercy, like saying the chaplet of divine mercy.
So it's like combining how you are on the inside with those outward actions, right? Showing your faith and devotion.
Exactly. And the church also says it's really important to, do works of mercy that day, like showing God's love and compassion to people who need it.
It's a good reminder, right? That getting to heaven isn't just about us. It's about sharing God's love with other people.
And that sharing, like showing your faith in a concrete way, that can be a powerful way to purify yourself. It helps you let go of those things that keep you attached to sin and selfishness, the things that might stop you from reaching heaven.
Okay, so we've gone through a lot of powerful devotions here.
Yeah.
The Rosary, the 12-year prayers of St. Bridget, and celebrating Divine Mercy Sunday. Each one offers these unique graces and a way to maybe shorten or even skip our time in purgatory altogether. But we were talking earlier about the brown scapular and its amazing promises. You said there were some conditions for this Abbotine privilege, especially reciting the little office. What exactly is the little office?
The little office, it's like a shorter version of the Liturgy of the Hours, the official prayer of the church that priests and religious people say throughout the day. It's a beautiful way to make your time holy, to praise and thank God and to think about his word.
It sounds, I don't know, pretty structured and like it takes a lot of discipline. Can regular people pray it too?
Oh yeah, totally. It's not a requirement for lay people, but praying the little office can be a great way to, make your spiritual life deeper and to be more connected to how the church prays.
But you mentioned alternatives to saying it every day, right? For people who can't commit to that, what are some of those?
The most common one is to pray the rosary every day. They let you substitute that because the rosary and the Carmelite order, the ones who, take care of the brown scapular devotion, are super connected.
So if someone is wearing the brown scapular and they pray the rosary every day, they've fulfilled the requirements for this Abbotine privilege.
That's right. The rosary, it focuses on the mysteries of Christ's life. And they see that as a good substitute for the little office. It gives you a similar chance to meditate and grow spiritually.
It's interesting, isn't it, how all these different devotions, they kind of weave together and support each other.
They really do. And it shows, how rich and diverse Catholic spirituality is. There are so many ways to become holy and be united with God.
But, as we keep talking about all these traditional devotions and practices, I feel a little tension. It's like, on one hand, we're supposed to do specific things, fulfill these requirements, almost like we're trying to earn our way into heaven.
I get what you mean. That's a tension that's been in the church forever, How do we balance grace, which is God's free gift of salvation, with the idea that what we do has consequences?
Exactly. It's like we're walking on this tightrope, trying to rely on God's mercy, while also knowing that we have to live a holy life.
And this is where Saint Thérèse of Lisieux and her little way come in. It's like
Right.
a breath of fresh air. It's not about, throwing out traditional devotions or saying that good works don't matter. It's about shifting our focus. Instead of just thinking about the external actions, we need to focus on the internal transformation.
Yeah, it's realizing that it's not just about avoiding purgatory. It's about growing in our love for God and making our will match his will.
Exactly. And Saint Thérèse believed that transformation happens through simple acts of love, done with, that childlike trust and complete surrender to God's mercy. She called it the little way, because it doesn't need big gestures or, extraordinary acts of piety. It's about finding holiness in the ordinary, like in the everyday moments of our lives.
That's why I love that line of hers. To pick up a pin for love can convert a soul. She's reminding us that even the smallest things, when they're done out of love, can be super powerful.
And her whole life proves that. She was a Carmelite nun, and she lived a simple life, doing her duties with humility and devotion. She didn't perform miracles or preach to huge crowds, but her impact on the church, it's been immense.
It's like she found a shortcut to holiness, right?
Yeah.
Like a way to skip all the complicated stuff and the anxiety that comes with trying to be saved.
It's not really a shortcut. It's more like A different way of seeing things. Saint Therese's little way is about letting go of that need to control, to earn, to prove we're worthy. It's about giving ourselves to God's love and trusting that He'll work through us even when we're weak and mess up.
It's a really beautiful message and so freeing, isn't it?
It really is. And it
Yeah.
gives us all a way to get to heaven. It doesn't matter where you are in life or how spiritually gifted you are. All you need is a loving heart and the willingness to say, okay, God, your will be done.
Yeah, it's like she's saying, don't get so hung up on like the rules of getting to heaven. Just, love God with everything you've got and He'll take care of the rest.
I love that. That's perfect. It's all about, giving yourself over to this love that's so much bigger than us, this love that's, just given to us. And it's so merciful.
So, okay, we've explored all these different paths to, bypass purgatory.
Hmm.
What's like the big takeaway for our listener? How can they, take what we've talked about and use it in their own like faith journey?
I'd say really think about what stuck with you during this whole deep dive. What, approaches or practices or ideas really like touched your heart.
Yeah, it's about finding your own way to be holy, right? The way that's going to lead you closer to God, the way that feels, right and true for you.
Exactly. And don't be scared to like try things out,
Exactly.
explore different devotions, different ways of praying. What works for one person, it might not work for another. It's all about finding what feeds your soul and brings you closer to God.
And if you mess up along the way, just remember that God's mercy is always there. He'll pick you up, dust you off, and get you back on track.
That's so good. And never forget how powerful prayer is. Just keep asking God for guidance, for grace, for the strength to keep going.
At the beginning, we were talking about how some Catholics like joke about aiming for purgatory. But after all this, it seems like maybe we should set our sights higher.
Absolutely. Why go for purgatory when, heaven's right there? Saint Therese's little way reminds us, that being holy isn't just for saints and mystics, it's for all of us. In the regular, everyday stuff, we just have to open our hearts to God's love and let Him change us.
It's realizing, that we're not just trying to like avoid something bad. We're trying to get to something good. This life with God now and forever.
That's the goal, right? To be with God forever in His
Yeah.
love and light.
So we've come to the end of our deep dive into bypassing purgatory. We've covered, the traditional teachings, what people have experienced, even some like different ways of looking at this whole question.
And through it all, one thing's so clear. Your desire to avoid purgatory, it comes from such a deep love for God. You're longing for that, ultimate union with Him.
It's about wanting to be with Him forever, not even a second apart from His love. I hope this deep dive gave you some tools, some practical things and some spiritual ideas to help you on your journey.
This is just the start, remember. Keep searching, keep asking questions, keep growing in your faith, and most importantly, keep loving.
And if you have more questions or, more sources you want to look into, don't be shy. Reach out. We're always here to help you dive deeper into the mysteries of faith.
Until next time, may God bless you on your journey to heaven.